I was 12 years old when I learned one of the most powerful lessons of my entire existence. One that shaped my destiny, my fortune, and my character. It wasn't taught to me by a wealthy mentor or some business genius. It came from something far simpler. The discipline to save my very first $50. You see, when you come from almost nothing, money doesn't just represent coins or paper. It represents possibility. It represents freedom. It represents the life you might one day build if you treat every penny with respect. At 12, I understood something that many grown men never learn. The habit of saving even the smallest amount can change the course of a lifetime. I remember the moment clearly. My family was not wealthy, not even close. My father was an inconsistent figure, often unpredictable, and my mother carried the weight of raising us with strength, faith, and relentless discipline. She used to say, "John, every dollar has a duty." And those words would echo in my mind every time I earned a few cents shining someone's boots, selling small goods, or helping neighbors with chores. But I didn't just save that money because my mother told me to. I saved it because deep down, I had this burning desire to build something bigger than the circumstances I was born into. I wanted to take control of my life. I wanted to break free from uncertainty. And I knew that no one was going to hand me that freedom. I would have to earn it. So there I was, a 12-year-old boy counting coins at the kitchen table, stacking them carefully. A penny, a nickel, a dime. Bit by bit, I watched the pile grow. It wasn't fast. It wasn't glamorous, but it was powerful. It made me feel capable. It made me feel responsible. It made me feel like the architect of my own future. That first $50 didn't come from luck. It came from persistence, from sacrifice. While other children spent their small earnings on candy or toys, I saved mine. Not because I didn't want the momentary pleasure, but because I wanted something much greater. The opportunity to invest in myself. You see, those $50 were more than currency. They were proof. Proof that I could create value in the world. Proof that effort compounds. Proof that even a boy with no connections and no fortune could carve out a path if he had discipline. And I want you to understand something very clearly. This principle didn't just apply in 1851 when I was a boy. It applies today, right now, in your life. You don't need to save $50. Maybe your number is 10. Maybe it's 100. What matters isn't the amount. What matters is the mindset, the commitment, the habit, the belief that small steps taken every single day lead to monumental transformations. When I held those $50 in my hands for the first time, I made myself a promise. A promise that I would never stop saving, never stop learning, never stop building. That promise became the seed of my entire life's work. It shaped how I approached business. It shaped how I approached investing. It shaped how I approached philanthropy. It shaped who I became. And I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine your future self, older, wiser, more accomplished, looking back at the version of you who decided to take control today. Imagine that future self saying, "That decision, that moment, that commitment, that was when everything changed." Because that is exactly what I would say to my 12-year-old self. I didn't know I would become one of the wealthiest men in history. I didn't know I would build one of the most influential companies the world had ever seen. I didn't know my name would become synonymous with both ambition and philanthropy. All I knew was that I wanted to build a better life. And saving those $50 was the first brick in that foundation. But let me tell you something crucial. Discipline is the greatest wealth you will ever possess. Not money, not assets, not opportunities. Discipline. Because discipline is what makes everything else possible. Discipline is what takes a boy with $50 and turns him into a man who builds an empire. Discipline is what transforms dreams into plans and plans into results. When I learned to save, I learned to value every resource I had: time, energy, knowledge, money. And once you learn to value those things, you stop wasting them. You stop acting like your goals can wait until tomorrow. You stop treating your life like something that happens by accident. You start building, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, habit by habit. And here's something I want you to feel deeply in your own heart. You are not defined by where you start. I started with nothing but determination and a few coins. What defines you is the direction in which you move. If every step you take moves you closer to discipline, closer to purpose, closer to growth, then your starting point becomes irrelevant. If a 12-year-old boy with holes in his shoes and no safety net could save $50, you can save something. If I could build the discipline to create opportunity in my life, so can you. And if I could turn a small beginning into a massive transformation, then you can too. Because success doesn't begin with wealth. It begins with intention, with clarity, with commitment, with that first decision to take responsibility for your future. And that is exactly what saving those $50 taught me, that I was capable of shaping my destiny, that I didn't have to accept the circumstances I was born into, that I could rise, grow, and build. And so can you. When I finally reached that $50 milestone, something awakened in me, something far more valuable than the money itself. It was a sense of identity, a feeling that I could steer my own fate. And that feeling, that internal shift, would influence every major decision I made for the rest of my life. I want to take you back to the moment I walked into the local bank to deposit my savings. I was young, but I felt older than my years, because I was carrying not just coins, but confidence. That small bank book they handed me, showing my deposit written in neat, careful handwriting. That was the first physical symbol of my commitment to my future. Most people underestimate the power of a beginning. They think the start doesn't matter because it's small, because it's humble, because it looks insignificant. But the truth is this: every empire begins with a single brick, every fortune begins with a single dollar saved, and every transformation begins with a single choice. My first $50 were the foundation upon which everything else would be built. I deposited that money and walked out of the bank with a straight back and a determined heart. I wasn't wealthy, not even close, but I felt wealthy. I felt capable. I felt like a boy who had proven to himself that discipline could overcome circumstance. And that's what I need you to understand as you listen to my story. You don't need to be rich to start acting like someone who will become rich. You don't need a fortune to begin building one. You don't need opportunities handed to you. You need to create them through your habits, your choices, your mindset. Saving $50 at 12 years old wasn't about the amount. It was about the person I was training myself to become. I began to study the value of money, not from books, not from teachers, but from real life. When you grow up with scarcity, you develop a sharp awareness of every decision you make. You begin to see patterns. You begin to understand how money behaves, how people behave, how effort compounds over time. I realized that every dollar I saved was a seed. And if I planted enough seeds, if I protected them, nurtured them, and invested them wisely, then one day they would grow into something far greater than I could imagine. That mindset was not an accident. It was a deliberate choice. Let me tell you something many people never grasp. Wealth is not built by chance. It is built by choice. And that choice is made every day, in small, quiet decisions when no one is watching. While other boys were playing, I was working. While others were spending, I was saving. While others were distracted, I was focused. It wasn't because I was special. It was because I had a reason, a purpose, greater than the temptations of the moment. And if you want to change your life, you must find your reason too. What future are you building? What life do you dream of? Who do you want to become? Because once you know that, discipline becomes easier. Sacrifice becomes meaningful. Every dollar saved becomes a declaration of who you intend to be. That first $50 changed how I saw myself. But more importantly, It changed how I saw opportunity. Every small job became valuable, not just for the money, but for the skills. I learned reliability, negotiation, customer service, and endurance long before I ever stepped into the world of business. These were not grand lessons. They were subtle, steady, powerful. When I earned my first few dollars helping farmers, I learned the value of consistency. When I sold small goods, I learned that people buy from those they trust. When I did odd jobs, I learned that humility is a better teacher than pride. These lessons didn't come from textbooks, they came from experience. And experience, I assure you, is the greatest instructor a young person can have. You see, many people wait for the perfect opportunity before they begin. But I learned that opportunity rarely appears fully formed. Most of the time it starts as something small, something others overlook, something humble. But if you handle the small opportunities with excellence, larger ones begin to unfold. That $50 milestone taught me that everything, absolutely everything, starts small. A dollar, a choice, a habit, a moment of discipline. Those small beginnings are the building blocks of greatness. Years later, when I entered the oil business, the principles I learned as a boy guided me. Efficiency, discipline, saving, reinvesting, avoiding waste, knowing the value of every cent. These were not the lessons of a businessman. They were the lessons of a 12-year-old who counted coins at a wooden table. I want you to recognize something essential. Habits built in times of scarcity are the habits that create abundance. If you can control your impulses when you have little, you will be unstoppable when you have much. When I saved my first $50, I wasn't just storing money. I was developing the strength to manage larger sums in the future. I was training my mind to resist temptation. I was building the discipline that would later help me make decisions involving millions. And discipline, once learned, becomes a lifelong companion. I remember nights when I lay in bed thinking about my future. I didn't know exactly what I would become, but I knew, without a doubt, that I would rise, that I would grow, that I would succeed. Not out of arrogance, but because I trusted the habits I was building. I trusted the boy who saved $50 because that boy had proven he could do hard things. And that is what I want for you as you listen to my voice. I want you to trust yourself. I want you to believe in your ability to start small. I want you to commit to the habits that move you forward, because you will be shocked at how far those habits can carry you. From $50 to $50,000. From $50,000 to $5 million. From $5 million to transforming industries and shaping economies. That is the power of one disciplined decision. As I grew older, that first $50 didn't remain just a memory. It became a philosophy, a compass, a guiding principle that shaped every move I made. And I want to share with you exactly how that simple act of saving became the blueprint for an entire empire. When you form a habit at a young age, especially a habit rooted in discipline, it becomes part of your character. It's not something you force yourself to do anymore. It becomes who you are. Saving money wasn't just something I did. It was something I became. I became the kind of person who respected every dollar, every opportunity, every bit of effort. And that identity, the identity of someone who builds rather than consumes, gave me an advantage far greater than money ever could. By the time I was a teenager, I wasn't just saving money. I was observing people, watching how they made choices, studying how they handled responsibility. I noticed patterns early on. Some people lived for comfort, while others lived for purpose. Some spent their earnings as quickly as they made them, while others understood the value of planting seeds for the future. And I knew which kind of person I wanted to be. When I turned 16, I decided it was time to take a bigger step. Time to use my savings not only as a safety net, but as a springboard. I wanted to earn more, not through chance, not through gambling, but through calculated effort. I applied for a job as an assistant bookkeeper, a position most young men never considered because it required focus, accuracy, and patience. But I saw something in that job that others didn't see. I saw a classroom. A place where I could learn how money moved, how businesses worked, how people succeeded or failed. When the company hired me, I treated that job like the greatest opportunity of my life. And in many ways it was. I would arrive early, long before other clerks, and stay after everyone else had gone home. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't trying to earn praise. I was investing in my future, in the same way I invested those $50. One thing you must understand about my mindset is this. I never worked for wages. I worked for wisdom. While others saw tasks, I saw lessons. While others saw routines, I saw systems. While others saw numbers, I saw stories. Stories of businesses growing, struggling, recovering, failing, or prospering. And slowly, I began to understand something profound. Money follows discipline, but great fortunes follow understanding. The more I learned, the clearer my vision became. But remember, this clarity didn't come from talent. It came from the habits formed years earlier. The habit of saving, the habit of patience, the habit of doing things others found too boring or too difficult. People often say success requires luck. Let me tell you something honestly. Luck didn't hand me $50 when I was 12. Luck didn't teach me bookkeeping at 16. Luck didn't build Standard Oil. Discipline did. Consistency did. Focus did. Faith in small beginnings did. And those qualities are available to anyone who chooses to develop them. While working as a bookkeeper, I witnessed firsthand the difference between businesses that thrived and businesses that collapsed. Do you know what separated them? It wasn't intelligence. It wasn't innovation. It wasn't even resources. It was management, precision, attention to detail, respect for every expense, every transaction, every small decision. And that resonated with me deeply. After all, that's exactly how I treated my first $50, with respect. I learned that waste is the silent killer of opportunity. Waste of money, waste of time, waste of talent, waste of potential. I refused to let waste exist anywhere in my life. That mindset would later allow me to streamline the oil industry, reduce costs, and transform inefficiency into unprecedented success. But again, this wasn't genius. It was habit. A habit that began with saving coins in childhood. Everywhere I looked, I saw possibilities. Not because they were obvious, but because my habits trained my eyes to see what others overlooked. That is the power of discipline. It sharpens your vision. It strengthens your intuition. It makes the invisible visible. It wasn't long before I started dreaming of becoming an entrepreneur. I wanted to take control of my income, my decisions, my destiny. I had saved enough money to start a small venture, not because someone handed it to me, but because years of discipline had prepared me for that moment. I partnered with a young man named Maurice Clark, and together we formed a small produce commission business. The risk was high and the profit uncertain, but opportunity was calling, and I was ready to answer. Those early days were demanding, filled with long hours and constant challenges. But I greeted every obstacle with determination, because I had learned the value of perseverance long before I ever set foot in an office. I treated every customer, every supplier, every transaction with the same seriousness I gave to my first $50. And slowly, the business grew. Not through luck, but through integrity, through consistency, through discipline. I want to share something with you that I hope sinks deeply into your mind. You do not rise to the level of your dreams, you rise to the level of your habits. Your dreams can be enormous, but if your habits are small, your dreams will remain fantasies. When I was 12, I didn't dream of becoming the richest man in the world. I didn't dream of dominating the oil industry. I didn't dream of building an empire. My dreams were modest, but my habits were strong. And those habits elevated my horizons year after year, opportunity after opportunity. Discipline creates momentum, And momentum creates magnitudes of growth that defy imagination. The boy who saved $50 became the young man who saved thousands. The young man who saved thousands became the businessman who invested millions. And the businessman who invested millions became the philanthropist who would donate more money than he ever imagined earning. And it all began with one small action, one disciplined decision taken by a 12-year-old boy who refused to waste what little he had.